getting out of debt is to money what diet is to food. It kind of has this quick fix promise. It has this wipe the slate clean. It has that binge the night before. That's where a lot of women in midlife are. Upwards of 80% of our financial decisions are emotionally based.
How can financial therapy help women in these midlife interruptions like divorce or career changes or caregiving for their parents or empty nesters?
Those two words, cheap and expensive, are so emotionally charged that it's really helpful to look at, are you using that word and what does that mean to you?
Wendy, girl, I'm so excited to have you back on the show.
Thanks. I'm so thrilled to be here. I love talking with you.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Wow, just right before we were hitting record, we were saying that this is really, I think, just such a topic, talking about money and finances. This is, I think, such a relevant topic for women, no matter what stage of life you're at, like whether or not you are, an empty nester or whether or not you're going through a divorce. I mean, these are all situations that, women in midlife face, or or even if you're happily married or happily single or whatever it is. I just think that like women in midlife, I think that this is just, it can be a time where we just start looking at our life and really wanting to make sure we're like set up for retirement. And we want to just make sure like it all just, I just feel like around midlife, it's like everything really just starts getting real because we have to like make sure we're set up for the rest of our life. And so, I work with a lot of women on who are going through divorce, and the financial piece of it is like the number one thing that causes women who have gone through divorce anxiety. I know it was for me. That was like the biggest, that was the big reason that I started my side hustle, was to, which is now my business, but was because of that. Right. So anyways, I just tee all that up to say, like, I'm so excited to have this conversation because you are definitely the expert here when it comes to just creating financial abundance and financial security and all of that. So this is going to be a really empowering conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, if anyone has lost sleep in the last week or month about money, I hope they will listen to this and feel encouraged.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone losing sleep over money or staying in a life they don't want because of money. Like, there's so many things that can be shifted.
Yes. Love that. So just right off the bat, some like rapid fire questions. I'm curious, like, what's one piece of financial advice every woman in midlife should know?
So as a financial therapist, which is still so new, I created these 10 principles, so I'll probably refer to them a few times. But one of the things I was thinking about that I think, gosh, if everyone knew this, is that there's really not a bad, good dichotomy with money. You're not, because often when we feel like we're bad, and I'm using air quotes, of course, here, that leads to a lot of stuckness. And one of my other key principles is to approach money with compassionate curiosity and zero judgment, which is usually the foundational game changer for most of my clients that I work with, and a lot of women that are not sure how to approach money. And we take the judgment out and we just create this nice soft path to go to it. So I think that I wish I had known that. I got divorced midlife as well. So I wish I had known that. I wish that there had been resources like your podcast. Like, that wasn't a thing when I got divorced. So that I think, just know that you can do it.
Yes. Yeah. One of the things that I really like women to start to think about is really getting clear and defining, like, what does financial stability really look like for you? Like getting really clear and like defining that. And I know for me, when I was able to do that, I was really able to realize that all of these things that I was listing were way more in my control that I was giving myself credit for, that I was way more competent and able to create these things in my life. Now, it required a plan and it required action. But I had more of the power when it came to my money and creating more of it than I realized.
Yeah, yeah. And some of that just comes from touching it, feeling it, knowing some of the numbers. There's a lot of women who haven't even been able to know their numbers yet. And so when you don't know that, it just feels like this void that you can never touch or deal with. And that can leave you feeling really stuck and despairing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned a minute ago, though, you said that you kind of, to answer
Hmm.
my previous question, you said that to not look at money as good or bad. Now, I know that
Yes.
that sounds, and I talk about that with even like food, right? I've talked about that in the
Right.
past with food, right?
Hmm.
Kind of
Me too.
taking the emotion out of it. But I'm curious,
Hmm.
like that's so much, I think it's easier said than done. So, like,
Oh, yeah.
what are some ways? That someone could start just like unraveling, kind of letting go that
Hmm.
belief that money is good or bad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it is, yes, first of all, what you're saying, it is so much easier said than done. It is a huge part of my, when I talk about the intersection of money and milkshakes, that's the healing with the money food connection, because so often that's the way food is approached as well. But when you can look at money and take out that good bad dichotomy, that polarization, then you can connect to what you're doing. It's almost like, I can't think of a good metaphor, dang it. I love metaphors. So if I think of one, I'll let you know. But it's really coming into this thing where if someone, for instance, has told you all your life that debt is bad, then you will still probably find yourself in debt, but you'll just keep it a secret, right? You'll hide it. You'll hide it from yourself. You won't look at your statements. You will think, oh, I'll get to that tomorrow, right? Like, because it's bad. So it has this emotional intensity of bad, which leads to certain ways. Same with food. If a food is bad, you will still eat it sometimes, but you will beat yourself up, or you will hide it, or you won't tell anyone, or you'll say real loud, diet starts tomorrow, or, whatever, because you're trying to really compensate for that. But when we can reduce that desire or that drive to compensate for something that we have decided is wrong or bad, then we can really approach money more calmly and mindfully and compassionately, and begin to look at, okay, well, what did lead to the debt, instead of like, I just have to get out of it. I just have to get out of it, as an example.
Yeah. Oh God. I mean, you kind of hit a nerve for me as far as like when it comes to that even just talking about debt. I mean, and what I've realized is that, yeah. I mean, I was actually just talking to a guy that I'm dating last night about this. That I grew up with my entire life that debt is bad. Credit card
Hmm.
debt is very, very bad. And granted, I'm not saying like, okay, it's good and we
Hmm.
want to get into it. But again, it's
Hmm.
not a good or bad thing. But
Right.
what can happen though, because I grew up with that whole like being in credit card debt is like the
Hmm.
worst of the worst. Yeah. I mean, what that created for me for a long time was just not even wanting to look at the credit card statements,
Hmm.
like waking up and having like just so much anxiety around it all of the time. And I
Right.
do think that mindset prevented me from thinking clearly on like what I can do to actually get out of it. I was so stuck in the
Hmm.
emotion of it that I wasn't allowing me to see the options for
Hmm.
how to climb out of that. And I think that is when I started
Right.
to shift that, and really becoming an entrepreneur is what forced me to start thinking
Mm.
about it differently, because you can rack up business card debt real damn or like business debt,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
really quickly. And
Yes.
if you're not logical about it and being able
Hmm.
to approach it more through like the lens of a CEO and not be so attached
Hmm.
to it, then it'll, number one, it'll take you down. Like the stress will be too much. But then
Hmm.
yeah, it'll I think it affects your business too.
Oh, for sure it does. Yeah, because it can erode your confidence
Yeah.
in whatever product that you're trying to offer, because you feel like, oh, well, I'm bad at this, or I've screwed this up, or whatever. Like, there's a lot of ways, and honestly, yes, I think people will find that for some reason, I don't know, it is easy to get large lines of credit or credit card available credit for businesses compared to personal life. So it
Mhm.
is important to have a plan if you're going to use debt as part of your business structure, and to also notice if it's coming out of a place of desperation.
Yes.
Then it's really helpful to look at to pause. There's a lot of pausing that I do and a lot of breathing. As you'll see behind me, it says breathe, which I will openly admit is both annoying and helpful. Like when I'm saying, okay, well, let's just catch our breath here. Let's take a breath. Let's notice. I do a little shopping exercise that I offer people, and it starts with being basically in your car before you walk into Target, taking 3 or 4 deep breaths and really connecting with, or before you open up the browser window with the shopping page, like pausing and thinking and creating this mindfulness, really bringing that in, because that is going to make a bigger change than quote unquote getting out of debt. But that's, one of my principles, and this has often been said too, is that budget or getting out of debt is to money what diet is to food. It kind of has this quick fix promise. It has this wipe the slate clean. It has that binge the night before, all sorts of things that come into this sort of magical thinking of when people say, well, I just need to wipe the slate clean, or I just need to get out of debt. That will make everything better. And then after they've done that a few times, they're able to say that doesn't actually make anything better. So being able to look at that. Now, that's where a lot of women in midlife are. They've debt cycled already 3 or 4 times with some sort of way that they cleared the slate, but they didn't look at what led to having debt. I call it having debt as a payment option instead of using a credit card. So if we look at, you're at the store window and you're like cash, Visa, or debt as a payment, whatever. It's like looking at it as a payment option, slowing down and asking, okay, what is it about this purchase? And that's usually rich. It really tells you a lot about it when we slow that process down.
Yeah, I mean, God, that's such a valid point, I think. And I love that you kind of referred to it as the debt cycle, because you are right. There is something I know for me when I've gone through, even in stages of my business where I've gone into business debt and then I've paid it off. And then if I didn't really address what was it in my business though that really got me there, which in the beginning stages of my business, I went through this, then I just found myself in it all over again. I mean, that's just, you just find yourself all over again. And so I love, just like we talk about with, like you said, with diet and exercise, with dieting, with all of that, it really is even about with our health. It really is about getting to the root of how you got there, for sure. Yeah. That's so, so important. So, okay. So what are the top 3 financial habits that you believe every woman in midlife should adopt for long-term success?
Well, okay, I'm going to be annoying again. I'm going to say incorporate a lot of breath. Okay, in other words, incorporate a mindful connectedness. So when I'm working with people, instead of saying that was a good decision or bad decision, I will transfer the language to something like connected spending or connected borrowing or connected earning versus disconnected, so that you want to have some neutral language around it. So having that breath, being able to pause, asking your money, what can it do for you? Because a lot of times when people do look at either a budgeting app, and there's some great organizational tools out there. So it's really not about organizing. If it was just about organizing, then the first app that came out would have solved all the problems, right? To be fair. So it's not about organization, and it's not about, kind of putting it into color-coded boxes, although I love color coding, so I'm not dashing that. But coming into that and looking at, okay, what do I want my money to do for me is a question a lot of people don't ask. They're just trying to, get the money and serve, do things for other people. So being aware, asking yourself that when you log into your account or your app, being able to ask the question, what do I want to know versus, oh gosh, how's it going to beat me up today? That's a big first skill to be able to look at it that way.
What are some of the things though that someone would want to know? Like, how do you flip that script? Like, how can I start to say, oh, these are the things I want to know?
Absolutely.
How much money? People will be like, I want to know how much money I have or I don't have. That's
right. Right. Well, it's usually what I don't have. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I will say, let's begin by asking first, okay, what am I making? a lot of people don't know what their income is. And what do I want to, so first knowing what's coming in, and then also knowing, okay, what's going out, which is a different way of looking at it than what did I do wrong? When we look at our spending and think, oh, great, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that, then that creates this dynamic of shame. So looking at, okay, what's coming in, what's going out, what do I like about what's going out, and being very judgment-free about it. This is part of like the dynamic of Ramit Sethi's stuff about building your rich life. It's like, okay, spend freely on what you love, but don't spend on what you don't love. And a lot of people get stuck on, well, I don't want to, I'm scared to spend on what I don't, but they haven't really looked at not spending on what they don't love. So looking at the spending without judgment, you're able to say, okay, I appreciated that, whatever, but I didn't love it, and I don't know that I'd want to spend on that again. Or maybe I bought 4 of these and I really need, one would have done it, or something like that, where you look at the decision without any judgment. Because when you're often we make our spending decisions in a lot of isolation, and we look at spending versus on often we have these, what I call money markers. So everyone could probably right now write down, what is a good price for a pair of winter boots? Okay. And out of, 30,000 women who listen to us talk today, they all might write down a different price, right? Based on their history, where they live. Like if you're in Florida, you'll be like 0. But here in Colorado, I'm like, okay, some people are spending $50 at Target. Some people are spending $400 at REI. Some people are like, oh, well, it's got to last for years. It needs to be $1,900, whatever. Like, so you've got this number, but you don't even realize that's your number. But let's say your number is $100 for a pair of winter boots. Then you're like, oh, well, these boots are $89.95. It's on sale. I did good by buying that. But you have no conscious connection to the fact that you had a $100 marker. So you're not making it based on your income and outgo. You're making it in isolation based on your marker of what makes a good price for boots. So then,
I just want to say, this is such an interesting thing, because you are so right. Because so as soon as you said that, the number that popped up in my head was $150. I'm like, okay, $150 for a pair of boots. And as you're saying it, though, I'm thinking to myself, you're right. I did not take it has nothing to do with, in that moment, of how much money am I making, how much money. It has nothing. Literally, I think it goes back to just pre-programming, or like from the way we grew up, or just all of these stories we have about money, or what we're used to, or whatever. Because you're right. So then when I see a deal, even though I'm not even realizing that $150 is my number necessarily, if I see a pair of boots that are $99, in my subconscious, I'm like, yes, that's it. This is a deal. And I'm not even thinking about whether or not I can afford them, whether or not nothing. It's just, to me, that's a deal. I need to jump on it. That's so freaking interesting. You're right. And I think that just goes back to so much of our subconscious programming about money, and depending on, how you grew up and what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, keep going, because that's interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's, and that's part of this pausing, where I have, one of the first exercises I give people is tracking transactions with thoughts and feelings. So where you'd be writing down, okay, I saw these boots. I think 150 is a good price for a boots. And Amber, thank you for sharing that honest answer to that too, because half your audience is like, what? And the other half is like, that's cheap, man. So we want to look at it without judgment. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So looking at that, then you write that down and you're like, okay, these felt like a bargain, and whatever. Or maybe if something for our kids, everybody raise your hand unless you're driving right now. If you've made a decision to buy something for your kids because you don't want them to do without, because you didn't have that when you were growing up, because you're going through a divorce, because you don't want them to know money's tight, all those becauses. So it's it doesn't matter the price, it's because of the because, right? So we've all done that. I've done that, for sure.
For sure.
So looking at this stuff, pausing enough to be like, oh, yeah. Okay, then coming back into what is my actual income? What are my actual outgoes? What is left for this kind of money? So looking at that, then that means maybe you don't buy the boots this month, or maybe you use last year's boots, or maybe you get 2 pair, who knows? But you want to make it based on that overall plan. So having a plan is super important. However, one of my principles is a plan is only as good as the adjustment process, which means maybe you have this plan and you're like, okay, I've dedicated $400 to everybody for winter boots. This probably comes up for me because I'm in Colorado. It's about to be winter, and it's got to get some new boots. So it's on my mind. So yeah. But it's a good example. So if you're like, okay, but then you go and you're doing the shopping and you have this marker, but you want to have this adjustment with it, how to adjust it if you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, they're all like super cheap. Maybe we also get tennis shoes, or maybe they're more expensive. And you're like, hey, I get 2 this month, 2 next month. So whatever. Those are how we make adjustments. We women, we make adjustments all day long, but somehow when it comes to a money adjustment, judgment flows in of like, well, that was good or bad. It was cheap or, expensive. Those 2 words, cheap and expensive, are so emotionally charged that it's really helpful to look at, are you using that word and what does that mean to you? Because cheap and expensive are not data points. They are like emotional, relative, like judgment words. So these are the kind of things we do in financial therapy. We look at the word, we look at what is the energy that's coming up with the word, and then how do you want to do that differently?
I love that. So, okay. So it's kind of going back to the 3 habits. You said definitely one, like breathing, like creating kind of that, just
mindful
that
connection.
intentional pause, right? Before you're making purchases, as you're like logging into your bank account, like whatever around money. I think the second one was probably, would you sum it up as like knowing your financial marker? Is that kind of, or
having a plan that you know how to adjust.
Yep. And then is there a third like habit that you feel like?
Yeah. I feel like it's really important to know your numbers. And so this gets really overwhelming. And I do not mean know all your numbers, because that's often what will happen is then we'll dive into all the transactions, but that's too much. But knowing some key numbers such as, and I'll say income again, because a lot of people don't know their income. They know kind of roughly what it is, but really coming into looking at the paycheck and then knowing that number, knowing a few key numbers that I break this down into 3 categories. This is sort of a take on the old school 50, 30, 20, or some people will say 60, 20, 20, if that math's right. Yeah. Like that. But to think of it as survive number, sustain number, and your soaring number, because I like to alliterate also. But knowing your survive number is sort of like, okay, what does it take to get through a month without any extras? That's just the basics. It's what you have already agreed to pay, like minimum payments on things, that kind of stuff. Knowing that number is really helpful, because that is the number when you start to begin to open up and explore your relationship with savings. This is the number when people say have 3 months, quote unquote, or 6 months saved up. It's the survive number. Start with that number, because usually that 3 to 6 months savings is so dang overwhelming. Nobody does it, or very few people do it, because they're like, I can never do that. But so if we start with this number, it can be helpful. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. So, asking for a friend here, but in the survive number, do I have to take out like my hair budget and my nail budget? Is that?
Well, kind of.
Right? Okay. So like how surviving is this? Like what are we? So are we talking about minimum bills? We're talking about like food. We're not it's like bare bones. So the survive number is bare bones.
Yes. It's sort of the unemployment number.
It's like that's a really good, I think, tangible way for people to look at that. So this is like if you were unemployed. What did that? And should you also look at it as if you had to pay cash for everything?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Do you know what I mean?
To look at it.
Because like some people are like, if I'm unemployed, I just put stuff on my credit card. Right. But no, like you're saying this survive number is like, what do you have to pay cash for?
Yes.
Not relying on credit cards, like your mortgage, your car payment, things like
Insurances.
Insurance.
Yes. Medications, things like that. Like what it takes to get through a month. Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, we do love to get our hair done. I agree. So that is what I like to call the sustain. Like this is, I use words like nurture my life and maintain my life. And I find, Amber, tell me if this connects for you, but when I'm able to go get my hair done and I call that nurture, versus I just did it, I feel some nurture. Like it
Sure.
increases the meaning of the transaction. So that sustaining number is like, okay, what does it take to sustain a nicely nurtured life? That is regular, whatever, to whoever it is. Like it may be regular hair appointments, it may be regular personal yoga classes, it could be regular brand new mountain bikes when you see a new one. Like that could really sustain your soul and cut down on bike maintenance or things like that. So that is that 30% number. When we look at the 50, 30, 20, just as a place to start, roughly that could be like 30% of your income set aside for that. And then the soaring number is that what does it take to just really get to that financial independence, that financial freedom, where you are just able to essentially have enough money that you cannot work unless you want to, which is, the old school way to call this is retirement, but retirement is such a kind of tired word. And people think so easily, I just won't retire, which is an avoidance strategy. So looking at, okay, well, what would it take to just really soar and enjoy life? So that's why I picked those words. Yeah. What do you think
No,
about
it's
that?
no, I know. I love that. I was going to say, what came up for me is I was like, okay, I think there is like an in between like retirement, like, and
Yeah.
then the soaring. I think there's like, for me, it was like, okay, so the maintain, or what did you call it? Not the main, the
Sustain.
sustain. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this means I can get my hair done. I can get my nails done. Then I think for me, the soaring is, okay, I can go get a massage now, every 2 weeks. I can add on some of these. I can take these vacations that I always like to do, still living relatively. And then I think the next level for me is like stupid money, right? Where I am retired, like kind
Yes.
of like FU money. Like this is like that to me.
Yeah.
There's like another level for
Yeah.
me. Like I want to get to stupid. You know what
I
I
like
mean?
that. I
Yeah.
like that a lot. Yeah. It's that just like there's so much money you don't know what to do with it, which is
Yeah.
you actually inadvertently brought up a really big issue that we didn't touch on yet. And that is this other pocket of women who are Sally Krawcheck, the founder of Ellevest, just recently has been quoted saying this too. Like, there is this pocket of women who are going to receive some of the highest numbers of wealth transfer in the next couple of decades, and they don't know what the hell to do with it. They haven't worked with the numbers. It's either through divorce settlements or through widowhood, losing their husband and having the money left over. Like all of this is real. It's happening. It's coming, and it's landing in people's pockets. And this is why one of my specialties is wealth transfer dynamics, because there is so much that comes up with that. It can feel like stupid money. It can feel like I don't know what to do with this, and that leads to certain behaviors
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really
So I'm glad
interesting.
we pocketed that in. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what are three signs that you have a good relationship with money? How do you know if you're doing all right with money?
Okay. I really like to say that you really feel comfortable and confident with money when you have this plan, this idea of a plan. And for many women, that is not a spreadsheet plan. That's a sketch on a piece of paper plan. It's where you can see how it's going to go. You can see how it's going to stretch out, and then you can put it in the spreadsheet and do the calculations if you want to. But knowing you have a plan allows you to rest in. Okay, I know I have a plan. I know I have already allocated money for this, that, and the other, and that the money's coming in. And then but you also know how to adjust it. If there's a health crisis, if there's something else, you're like, okay, that maybe we don't take that vacation this year. We do this. Those kind of adjustments. So I think that's a big one. And knowing also that you, I guess, know your mindset, know where your sort of reactivity will come from. So understanding your mindset enough to shift it. That's one of my programs. It's called Money Mindset Shift, because those words tend to really embody this for me, is the ability to understand for instance, if you come from a lot of scarcity, how that shows up and how to shift from it. So how to begin to do those practices. And then I think another one is really having a clear way to manage the data points of money, because that is a big part of money as well, is the data points, the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure. Just understanding, what to actually look at, understanding things like your net worth and your debt ratio, like all of these things,
Yes.
like are really, really important. So, well, you mentioned one of your programs. I know you've thrown out this term a little bit to the listeners, this financial therapy, which you said is a relatively new thing. So, what exactly is financial therapy, and how can it help women feeling stuck post what I like to call, midlife interruptions like divorce or career changes or caregiving for their parents or empty nesters or whatever.
Right.
How can financial therapy help women in these various stages of their life?
Yeah. Well, financial therapy is, in a nutshell, that meeting you at the intersection of money and emotions. And I think that is what is so powerful about it, is it validates that our financial life is highly emotional. And a lot of people haven't even made that connection yet, or they don't understand that. But there's enough research now that shows upwards of 80% of our financial decisions are emotionally based. So it's really helpful to know that. So I find financial therapy first helps women validate, because they know, they're like, yeah, money is so emotional, but sometimes it's hard to find an audience to have that conversation, which is another big, really big thing that a financial therapy session can do for you, is you're not alone. So many of my clients, so many women I speak to when I speak at different workshops and things, they really resonate with how alone they feel. There's just not this place to talk about it without judgment. There's not a place to talk about it with someone trying to sell you something or trying to tell you what to do. So financial therapy is this, judgment-free zone to just talk it through. And sometimes that's enough to make different decisions. Or I'm also a trained money coach, so I blend that in. So maybe we really look at a different tactic or build a plan based on something different, so that there is, hope. We really want to instill hope and encouragement in financial therapy as well. So I think those are a couple of the big things that can be really helpful. And yes, these life transitions are huge. Divorce is a huge one. And also really looking at how to not be in a position where you feel like you have to stay married for the money. And that's a huge one. That's a huge one for women to be able to say, or even in same-sex couples, it can be a higher earner and a low. Like every couple I've met, there's a higher earner and a lower earner, no matter what. So really, how to come together on that is a big part of where financial therapy can be helpful. But knowing how to have conversations about it with your partner that keeps it in a way. There are different ways to create an environment where you don't feel like you have to stay married for money, but that is still, that still happens. It still happens.
Yeah, I love this idea of financial therapy. I think it's so important. I think we think about, especially if we're going through something traumatic like a divorce, or even if we're just midlife and we're at a place in our life where we're not happy where we are financially and we want to improve our situation. I think I know for me, I never even knew financial therapy was a thing, right? I mean, if I wanted to improve my financial situation, I just knew to go read a Dave Ramsey book or whatever. And he's amazing and that's all great. But I'm just saying, I think that really getting to the root of our money stories and really understanding that. I know for me, that's been a huge, huge game changer for me, and just becoming an entrepreneur, being on my own again, with money post divorce and all of that. So I love that. Well, how can if somebody in midlife wants to really begin to create a financial plan, right? Whether no matter what stage of life that they're in, that really aligns with their goals and with their values. How does somebody even begin to do that?
Yeah, I love that question, because there's a lot of different ways. So one of the things that I love to do is help somebody really connect to their learning style and their sort of writing style, or maybe they're more artistically driven or more creative. And a lot of times it's really helpful to start with a piece of paper and a timeline instead of a spreadsheet or some sort of budgeting app, because this isn't about budgeting. This is about looking ahead. Looking ahead is often something we forget to do with money. We tend to look, it's often said we look in the rearview mirror more than we look out the windshield, because we look at what we did wrong. And again, that leads to a lot of stuckness. It leads to a lot of, tons of reasons why it doesn't feel like you can get traction. So looking ahead, putting on a timeline, just to start out with a timeline, put some bubbles on it, and put the bubbles on there in terms of, okay, I'd like to retire. I would like to have X number of dollars a month when I retire. Okay. I would like, perhaps you want to help your kids with college. You want to do this, and you put that on there and you're like, okay, I want to be able to give them this. And then maybe you want to go on a vacation every year. So you put that on the timeline and you just start filling in the numbers without any judgments, without a lot of math yet. You just sort of put it on there and begin to build this life that you want. Then do some backwards math and see, okay, what does that look like? Then you'll begin to see, okay, maybe I can't do it all right now. And then I have a choice of either, what do I want to take out? What do I want to postpone? Or can I increase my income? Or if you're in a marriage relationship where you don't know what the money situation is, which I still work with people who have very divided and unsure money situations in their marriages or their partnerships. So if they don't know, then that helps them begin to have a conversation with their partner about, here are some of my dreams and wishes. Here are some of the numbers attached to them. What do you think? And then they can begin to have that conversation. So starting out with a lot of softness, with a lot of understanding that you want to have some flexibility, but that it's also okay to dream, I think really helps. And putting it on a piece of paper in a timeline format can really help you do the back math to how much. Let's say you want to spend X number of dollars on vacations, then you can divide that by however many months or years you have to put that together. Then you look at that plan and you look at your income and you see how it fits. But again, doing it in a mindful way, not if you start to feel despairing or start to feel some this will never work or something like that, then just take a break. Go take a walk. Back off from it so that you can come back to it.
I love the idea of that. Yeah, that reverse engineering, basically, right? Like looking ahead, really understanding, a plan of where do you want to be? What are some of your wants that aligns with what's important to you, and then backing it out. Absolutely. Well, one of the things that you and I spoke about when the last time you were here, well, actually, I think we actually even spoke about it like offline after we stopped recording, and that was part of the reason why I wanted you to come back, is we were starting to have this conversation around money and our kids. And, I had said to you, like, one of the things that I really struggle with is, I do, my ex-husband and I both make way more money than I had when I was growing up. And so we are at this stage in our life where we can afford to get our kids nice things and experiences and things that we didn't have. And but I struggle with that though, because I still want my kid. Basically, I don't want my kids to grow up as spoiled effing brats. Like, there's no easy way to say it, right? Like, I want them, I want them to appreciate what it means to work hard and get a freaking job. I mean, good God, I can't even get my kids to like barely put their damn dishes in the dishwasher. And I'm like, dude, I was doing the dishes on an assigned night, and since I was 7 years old. And so obviously part of that's on me. I do think when you, it can be, and I want to acknowledge all my listeners out there who are divorced. I do think that when you have split homes, it can make things harder in that regard. But I just say all that to say, like, one of the things you and I talked about is like, okay, like, how do you balance that? How do you balance like trying to teach your kids what it means to work hard and appreciate money and what it takes and appreciate things, but also being able to like give them a life that you never had. And that I struggle with that a lot.
Oh, and you're not alone. You're not alone at all. And And I appreciate that, like doing the dishes example too, because my kids are now 30 and 32. And ever since they left home, they always clean up their kitchen. I'm like, where was this child when you lived at my house?
Sure, sure.
And so, yes, so there's hope. It gets better.
Sure.
But also, yeah. And I think, I was a single mom too. And that sometimes it's just okay to know that you can't teach them to do the dishes right now because you've got every other thing on your plate, so we want to hold space for that. So let me bring in one of my favorite principles that I use of money, and that is to take the money word out, because as long as we think money is making them a spoiled effing brat, then we keep it in that money energy. So we look at, okay, what's going to create a sense of entitlement? What's going to create a spoiled brat? And often we can look at then we begin to have different conversations with them. We get a better understanding of age appropriate conversations and understanding of money, and things like beginning to not feel like money has either done it or money is the problem or the solution, which is kind of what you're wanting to teach your kids, that money isn't the problem or the solution. It's just a tool to be a part of our life. And that we are all, we all have a place where we can look at others with less and others with more. So it's how do we energetically make peace with where we are, what we have, and what we don't have. So beginning to pull it away from it's money is the issue. Then we begin to talk about what are the values that we want to teach our kids and how do we want to teach them that. And it's very, very much part of the dialogue you want to have with them. And if you notice, like say you notice often it'll be like maybe a 7 or 8 year old that wants something extra, and you're like, oh my gosh, like the thing you want to say constantly is, do you think money grows on trees? Kind of this feeling of like, what do you think's going on here?
Yeah.
But recognizing, I remember back when I recognized this too, like when you're in the grocery store, for instance, this kid spends 30 minutes with you and you're just throwing things in the basket and they want to throw something in the basket. They have no context. So being really aware of their context is super important so that you can speak to them in a way of explaining, okay, this is how we go to the grocery store. But again, the other thing that I really like to do, especially say under 14 years old, is to keep the sentence as many words in the sentence as they are old, so that you don't have to overcomplicate it. Sometimes you want to, if you're especially.
Can we do that
really,
with men too? Should we do that with? Should we?
No,
Children.
possibly.
Okay,
yes. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I think it belongs to men too. Okay. Good.
Yes, absolutely. So. That's a good one. So like keeping it right, simple. In fact, that is one of the things that I recommend for when we talk about partner communication, is to limit it at first to 10 or 15 minutes. Like, so every time you talk with them, reminding yourself this is one of literally like probably 672,000 conversations about money, so that we don't feel that pressure to dump all the stuff on them at once. But also, one of the things that I find we don't do a lot of is talk to ourselves and then talk to our kids about our income sources. So begin to talk to yourself when you get paid about how you felt about that paycheck. What did you enjoy about what you did to get it? What did you not enjoy? What would you like to do differently? That can often really help decrease like work angst, because you're coming into you're really touching that paycheck with this thing. Then you're talking with your kids about, well, let me tell you a little bit. Okay. 5-year-old gets 5 words. I make money. Mommy goes to work and this is how money comes in. And then once I have all the money, I make certain decisions with it. That's plenty, because a kid understands decisions. Putting it like that and saying, this is a decision we're making right now, or this is, that's something I haven't fully decided yet, or kind of putting it in an arena that they understand, because they're deciding when they're going to do their homework, for instance, or if they're going to do their homework, or, like that's a decision too. So putting it into an arena, but also without any judgment. Because I don't know if this is connects for you, Amber, but a lot of people really learned about money in a judgmental way after they made a quote unquote mistake. So in other words, how could you have spent that much money on that? Do you not understand where money comes from? Like, that's not a lesson. That doesn't help. That's a scolding, or that's kind of a judgmental moment. So really looking at taking that judgment out. But it's hard for us because a lot of us were taught that way. We were taught by getting scolded for a quote unquote mistake. Does that connect for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that you said though that really hit home for me and made me realize that that I can shift is the fact that you said about going back to like basically how do we teach our kids to, kind of not be spoiled brats and appreciate the dollar, do whatever. But it's by taking the focus off of money. Because and really leaning into what are the other values that I want to instill in my kid. Like money's just like a piece of it, right? Like that's just that's just the energy to be able to get the things or not get the things or whatever. But it's like you really want to instill in them the values of having gratitude, of of appreciating what you have, of that hard work. Like the money piece of it shouldn't really even be on the table as much because by doing so, and I was just thinking through as you were talking, I was like thinking through like examples, right? So for instance, and this is language that's flown out of my mouth, when like the kids, we want to go get something to eat and they want a soda and a soda's like $5. And I'm like, I'm not paying $5 for a soda. Like, sorry. And instead, maybe leaning into, listen, like, let's whatever. Let's have, we've got some sweet, you've already had some sweets. So let's talk about like why having some water is important or whatever it is. I'm just thinking about like, how can I take that example and not make it so much about just the money? Like, because that's all that they know, that they're just drilling into. This is a $5 soda that I can't have. And so by doing that, by me constantly, in my mind, I'm teaching them about appreciating a dollar. I'm actually just repeating the same cycle that I grew up in. Like I'm actually just drilling that home for them even more. And so I think what I need to do a better, and maybe I missed your point. That's how I interpret it though, right? Is like, is like stop making the conversations around money, and being thoughtful about what are some of these other lessons that you want them to understand about, maybe in that situation with the soda, like fueling their body with other things other than soda and sugar and all of that, and why that's important. And just stop making it all about the money. And I think you could still obviously have the money conversations. I mean, we don't want to have our head in the sand around that. Right. But I think that's something that a lot of us fall into and we're just repeating the cycle.
Well, it's a great example because there's so much there. And that's even an intersection of food and money too, because you're looking at that going, okay, what if we want to create more neutrality around this? Otherwise, it becomes a very angsty moment when they're trying to decide, or what do they understand about the difference between like soda, juice, or water, or whatever, or what do they understand about the what $5 is, so really looking at what is their context for that money. But also, sometimes also they're looking at you getting a glass of wine and they're like, okay, well, what was that? So you're looking at, once you get your own context. So let's say, for example, maybe this restaurant, because I bet that restaurant moment happens. It's going to happen a million times tonight.
All the time. I live in Atlanta. So there's $5 and it doesn't even come with a refill. Yeah. It's just $5 for a Coke. And I'm like, that's stupid.
Yeah. And where did free refills go? Gosh. Like, who the heck thought that was a bad idea? But it's kind of this whole like, okay, here's how mom's going to make decisions today. Let's think about what are you hungry and thirsty for if it's a food thing, or, what can we do with these shoes if we're looking for shoes or whatever the kids are buying, because they also don't know maybe that same day you paid $250 for band camp or something, so you're coming into this thinking you might be coming into the meal And again, I know as annoying as it is to have a breath before you start this decision-making process can be really helpful. And notice, okay, how am I coming into this moment?
Yeah.
I already feel like the kids got more of my money today than I did.
Yeah.
So then you're like, well, damn it, I'm getting this glass of wine and they can drink water or whatever. Like you just want to know that context so that it doesn't feel so angsty, because when you come into, especially a meal for, situation with heightened anxiety or angst, anger, whatever, resentment, whatever it is, you're not even going to digest that food very well. So it's a full body experience at that moment that we want to pay attention to.
Yeah. And I just think that that's a really good point that you bring up, is being just constantly having that mind body connection too about how we're coming into. Cause I can tell you, like, straight up, probably most of the time when I'm like freaking out over a $5 soda, when you're right, like I'll order a $17 glass of wine, probably something happened that day, or it's in a period where I'm feeling stressed for money or something like that. Right. Or something, a big expense just came up, or whatever that looks like. And I think that just having that level of awareness is so, so important. I love that. Well, okay, just a couple more questions as we round out our time today. I'm just curious, what resources or tools would you recommend for women looking to boost their financial literacy?
Oh, that's a great one. Personally, I have really found that there are some great websites out there, like NerdWallet is one I go to a lot, and they don't support me or anything like that. This is just me as a human being saying, I like this. There's also, sometimes your bank will have a good, depending on the bank, they'll have a nice resource page of just flat out definitions. Tiller HQ also has, that is a Google product that's also now available on Google Sheets and, but also on Excel, where you have a ton of very brief tutorials on a lot of subjects. And so I think that's also a really nice one as well. You want to know your source material. I think that it's less helpful to, it can be less helpful to go to social media for financial advice, because sometimes that is a little more skewed to that kind of clickbait idea. So going to something that is kind of been around for a while, is there for you to just give you data points, is really helpful. And also recognizing you don't have to get a master's in finance. Like, take it in small bites. And as soon as you start to get overwhelmed, take a break, because that means your brain is saying, whoa, I'm not going to take any more of this in. So let's say you just want to understand how a credit card works, and you go to NerdWallet and you're like, how does a credit card work, or something like that. And you read it, and then you're like, oh, dang, I didn't know any of that. And then take a break, like that was enough. Because often we try to, for some reason, we really try to do all the money stuff in 1 hour, like get it all in, and that doesn't work. So break it down. So I think that's a really good resource. Financial therapy is not as much as an educational resource. I offer that because I'm also a trained money coach, so I can offer that educational part. But financial therapy can help you process the information, or sometimes I will help people role play what kind of conversation to have with a financial planner if they're at that point in their life where they're going to have those conversations, because they often will kind of move into a fight, flight, or freeze because they're so anxious about it. So if we role play it, they feel a little more prepared for it. So that's another really good tool, so that you know what you want to know, what you want to ask, and you know how to hear what you're going to hear, and how to call it when it's too much, when you start to get flooded.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Last question I have for you is, if you were to give advice to someone who just got out of a divorce or is struggling with money management and is really feeling overwhelmed by the emotional aspects of it, like what piece of advice would that be?
Gosh. Well, obviously talk to a financial therapist can be really helpful. However, to be honest, there's just 100 or maybe 200 of us in the world, as far as I know. So it's still so new. So finding perhaps a therapist where you can just talk about it can be really helpful. Finding a way to not feel so alone, but also just listening to you and me today say that it is going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to get through this, because so often it feels so overwhelming and so flooding that you just think it's impossible. And when you start to think it's impossible, that leads you down a different path. It leads you to either a lot of despair, depression, avoidance, anxiety. If you're losing sleep over it, sleep is very important to decision making. So you can just see how sleep deprivation and money decision making, no, that's no bueno. It's not going to be a good party. So those kind of things can be really helpful. So I hope that, what do you think about that?
No, I think that that's great. And actually, I'm so glad that you brought up the sleep thing because I was actually going to tag one thing on there.
Yeah.
I will tell you, and this is just even through my own experience, I can tell you that when my anxiety is the highest around money is when I am not taking care of myself, meaning like I didn't get a lot of
Yeah.
sleep the night before, or maybe I had too much wine the night before. I mean, this is one of the reasons why, several months ago, I went alcohol free because I was just like the anxiety in my life, in various parts of my life, just by not taking care of myself and just the basic stuff like drinking enough water, getting enough sleep,
Yeah.
eating right. Like I just noticed I would get stuck in those like fear and anxiety cycles, and I was so much more clear and level-headed and had that clarity, and I could see options, can see a path out when
Yeah.
I was taking better care of myself. I mean, honestly, focusing on reducing the stress and anxiety in your life, I think that in itself will give you a much more clear path of how to, how to manage your money more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in order to do that, take the money word out of the sentence, because then you're more likely to be able to see what it is that's stressing you out. Maybe it's fear of failure. Maybe it's, maybe you're living in a constant catastrophe zone. You're mentally catastrophizing. When you can take out, like if you think I never have enough money or whatever, take the money word out. I'll never have enough safety and security. Then you can work on that. Like there's ways in which you can begin to sort of, turn the volume down on the money screaming words and look at there's other ways to achieve soothing, nurture, calm across the board.
Yeah. I love that. Wendy, thank you so much for today. So many just awesome nuggets and insights. I appreciate you. Where
Yeah.
can the listeners find you, learn more about what you do, access any resources that you have?
Yeah, yeah. I am at financialtherapysolutions.com. So, or they can Google Wendy Wright, financial therapists. But that should usually take them there. And there I have a nice assortment of free resources. They're often journal prompts. So they're great to put in your journal if you're a journaler, which I am. So I love that. But starting with right now, you'll find some script flips. So it's really like we try to take like, oh, there'll never be enough money, just like I just did. Oh, there'll never be enough. I'll never feel safe enough or whatever. Like kind of changing some of the words, being able to increase communication. And then the overall bigger program is the Money Mindset Shift program that allows you to walk through shifting awareness, shifting thoughts, feelings, and then touching numbers and beginning to shift the relationship to that. So it's a self-guided program to walk through some of the materials that most of my clients have found really helpful. And then as I have this year really added in this wealth transfer dynamics specialty, I just finished a blog series that's available just in my resources page to read about some of the key dynamics and issues and some tips and ways to help wealth transfer goes more smoothly, because that's going to be a big thing we're going to be talking about. So that is all available again at financialtherapysolutions.com.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely include that in the show notes. Wendy,
Cool.
thank you so much for being here. I
Thanks
really,
for
really
having me.
appreciate your time
I
and
love it.
expertise.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much.